Hi, today we are going to make some wide leg pants, super simple, 3 pieces, front, back, waistband. We're going to use this simplicity pattern when making these pants. It's pattern 9789, wide leg. We're using this knit jersey that we got from Joann's, and this top matches it. The top and all the information about the top and the pants and all the fabric and everything, the top, and then this also knit little tank underneath are from McCall 6559. So if you have this in your stash, pull that one out too. Let's get sewing. All right, these pants are pretty simple to put together. There's 3 pieces. There's the front, the back, and the waistband, and you're going to love them. So the first step is to sew the front and the back of the leg at the inseam. So I am going to clear my table here so we have space. So I'm going to take piece 5, which is the back, and because this jersey is essentially the same on both sides, I made a decision right at the beginning to decide which was going to be the right side of my garment, because you want to be consistent, even though you can't see the fabric, the difference in the fabric when you're looking at it. Sometimes once you construct it and the light shines on it, you can. So you want to be consistent. I put a pin, once I decide how I'm cutting it, I put a pin in the right side. So I always know what's the right side. So I'm going to open up my 2 back pieces, right sides up. And then I'm going to open up my 2 front pieces, which are piece 4. And one of the things, besides cutting pants on the grain, which is super important, one of the things that you want to consider when you're sewing pants is that your seams line up. Let me just put these together here, right sides together. So in order to do that, I like to start pinning, this is the inseam, I like to start pinning at one end. And then I'm going to go all the way down to the other end and put a pin in. And if we cut these correctly, they should be the same length. But if we don't pin them this way, sometimes we end up, especially with a stretchy fabric, one piece longer than the other, and that's going to cause our pants to twist. And if you sew them without pinning them, particularly if you're using a knit stitch, the feed dogs will feed that lower piece faster than the presser foot feeds the upper piece, and you end up with one side shorter than the other, which is no fun. So these match perfectly. So that's the inseam. I'm going to flip them over. We're going to do the same thing with the outseam. I'm going to start at the very top, and then I'm going to go all the way down to where the hem is and pin that piece together. And then fill in the pins in between. And I've made these pants already. They go together terrific. They're kind of fun to wear, and especially with this fabric, this floaty jersey is, they're really nice to wear when it's hot outside, because they're not close to your body, but they look dressy, so you can kind of go either way with these. You can wear them to the beach. You can also wear them out to dinner. So I'm going to sew up the inseam and the outseam of both pant legs, and then we'll come back and put them together. All right, we've sewn both of our legs, the inseam and the outseam of both legs, right sides together. A couple of things I want you to think about. Use a stretch stitch on your machine if you have one. If not, use a small zigzag, which is essentially what the stretch stitch is. And also, when you're sewing these, you want to line up the raw edges of the front and back piece. The back part of our pants traditionally on a pattern is larger than the front part, so you can't like lay them flat and pin them. It doesn't work. We're constructing something that's multi-dimensional out of something that's flat. So keep that in mind. Now we want to sew the crotch seam. So I have this pair with the wrong side out, so the right side is here on the inside, and I'm going to take this leg pair, and I'm going to turn it right side out. And I'm going to stuff it inside my other pair. I'm going to match up the center waistband. This is the front or the center back, I'm not sure at this point. And then match up the inner leg seam. And if you push one set of seam allowances to the left and one set of seam allowances to the right, you can butt these together and get a really nice seam. And we're going to go back up and sew the other center piece. This looks like the center front. The center front is shorter than the center back because that's the way our bodies are. So now you have something that looks like this. There's two legs inside of one, and we're going to sew this curve. So I'm going to put a few more pins in it just because this fabric is a little slippery, and with the stretch stitch going through the machine, it kind of chunks along. So it moves the fabric a little bit. So a couple of extra pins in that. So this, we're going to sew from here all the way around to here. Now, this seam is the seam that gets the most stress. So you have a couple of options. You can re-sew it inside the seam allowance, or if you have an overlocker or a serger, you can certainly do that. Either one of them will work, or a zigzag in between the raw edges and the seam. It's just a secondary seam to protect you in case you sit and something lets go. All right, so we're gonna go sew that. The last piece that we have to assemble is the waistband, and that is piece 6, and you cut 4 of these. This is the yoke. And what we wanna do is take them in pairs. So here's one yoke. This is a pretty curvy yoke, right? So this is the waist end, and this is the lower part. So this attaches to your pants, and this is the waist. I'm not quite that curvy, so I cut this a little straighter. Certainly, if you are more curvy, you can make it more curvy or less curvy. This is the opportunity to make things the way you would like them to fit you. So I'm looking at my pins. I'm taking right sides together, and I'm going to sew these ends to make a big band. And I'm going to do that for both of them. You're going to have a pair of these because you cut 4. So I'm going to sew this side of the waistband and this side of the waistband, so that will make one. And then I'm going to do the same thing to the other pair, which will give me a facing. So here, if you're like me and you run out of fabric, typically, I mean, I just had enough for these pants and I made a jacket, so it was perfect. But if you run out of fabric, you can make the facing out of a different color, out of a different fabric. If you have something that is the same weight as this fabric, then that is the opportunity to add some color, or you know, not give up on the pants just because you don't have exactly the right amount of fabric. I love coming to the point at the end of my garment and just having enough fabric, because I don't want to waste fabric. I don't want it going into the landfill. My goal is to use up everything. Sometimes I use it as trim. All right, so I have my 2 waistband pieces, so I'm going to sew these on either side, and I'm going to sew my crotch seam, and then we'll come back and put them together. Alrighty, we stitched our center seam, and then I went and I did a stepped zigzag on that seam in the seam allowance, just to give me an extra layer of protection. Now this is going to seem counterintuitive, but the next thing I'm going to do is just clip through this a little bit here and a little bit there, only because it will let that curve relax a little bit and it fits better. It looks better on. All right, so those are finished. And when you take the leg out from inside the other one, you have pants. Ta-da, pants. All right, that's exciting. So now we have our waistband is the next step. So I'm sewn 2 of these. Okay. And now I want to sew them together to make a facing. So I'm going to turn one of them inside right, because I want to put right sides together. And this is the top. The shorter curve is the top. So this gets attached to the top of these pants that we just made. So I want to stitch this shorter curve. So this one is right side out, and then I'm going to put this one over it. And this one is wrong side out. And I'm going to stitch them to make a big circle. So I'm going to match up my seam allowances, and I like to butt them. I'm going to send one seam allowance one way, one seam allowance the other way. So remember, we're doing this on the smaller curve. And then I'm going to do the other side. And we cut these all at the same time, so they should fit. Make sure you don't twist them in the process here. Okay, there we go. Same thing with the side seam. And then I'm just going to pin them all the way around. And what we have is a circle. This is my shorter circle side, right? This is the inner circle, and I'm going to stitch this all the way around because this is going to be the top of my waistband. So I'm going to run a stitch all the way around where my pins are, and then we'll come back and talk about elastic. Here's my stitched waistband. I've stitched the smallest part, and the elastic in the pattern is fairly short, narrow, and it's sewn up here at the top. I don't particularly care for that. I like a wide elastic. So I used my elastic guide, and you pick your size and then cut your elastic that size. Just make sure that you're happy with that, because the elastic is smaller than the waistband. And then I used 2-inch elastic, and I cut it to the right size, and then I stitched it together in a circle. But you can see that this is smaller than my waistband. So the method that I'm going to use, I'm going to insert this into my waistband, but first I want to fix my waistband. Now when I turn the waistband inside right, so the right sides are on the outside, it's wobbly around the seam, and I don't want that. I want this seam to be nice and tight. So in order to do that, I need to understitch, because you can see like the seam allowance is waffly, it's not pretty. So I'm going to understitch this, and on the facing side of my waistband, and that is your choice, whatever your facing side is, I am going to stitch the seam allowance to the facing of my waistband very close to the seam. So I'm going to push my waistband, this is my facing, I'm going to push the seam allowance towards my facing and stitch right here. So this will be inside the garment, you won't see it. I'm going to use a stretch stitch because this is going over my hips to get to my waist. So I'm going to stitch this all the way around, and what that will do is that will help me make a really nice seam at the top of my waistband. The alternative is to top stitch it, but I don't want that look. I want this clean. So I'm gonna go do that, and then we'll insert this 2-inch waistband. All right, quick little stitch. Stitch that seam allowance to the facing, and then what happens when I fold this without even pressing it, it actually folds all on its own beautifully. So that looks great. That's going to sit better on my body without too much effort. So now I want to insert the elastic inside the casing, and I'm just going to fold the elastic in half and pin each half. So I'm going to mark it with a pin because I want the elastic to be balanced. As you can see, the elastic is smaller, and I want the stretch of the elastic to be balanced to the front and the back. So I'm going to insert this inside at the seam. So I'm going to take that pin, and I'm going to put that right there and just pin the waistband over it. So now my elastic is pinned. There we go. So now my elastic is pinned up at the top to the seam allowance. I'm going to go around to the other side. I'm going to make sure I don't twist my elastic in the process. And I'm going to pin this mark on this seam allowance. So now what I've done is I've balanced the waistband and the elastic. It's a little floppy, but that will come back together once we sew this waistband to the pants. It's because these are flopping around down here. Let me just pin this so you can get a better vision of what I'm doing. All right. So now I have the waistband and the elastic together. And the elastic is up at the top. And what I'm going to do, it's also balanced between the front and the back. I'm just going to run a stitch on either side in the ditch on that seam allowance and this seam allowance, putting the facing and the front together and stitching the elastic at the side seams. So the rest of it's all open. And after I finish that, I'm going to go back and just quickly with a baste these edges of the waistband closed and make them one unit. And then it will be easier to sew, because this fabric is a little slippery, it will be easier to sew it to the top of my pants, because then it will actually be one unit as opposed to trying to sew three pieces together. Now I know the elastic is only attached to the side seam. If down the road I decided that I wanted it to be more attached, I can go back and do a stitch like I did with these pants here and encase it. But I want to try it this way because I think once I have them on, it's not going anywhere, and I like this look better. It's cleaner. This fabric is a lot lighter and more delicate than this fabric. This is a pretty heavy knit. All right, so I'm gonna go take care of that and then we'll assemble our pants. All right, here's my waistband. I stitched in the ditch on each side seam all the way down, and then I matched up my edges of my facing and my waistband to make it easier to put them on my pants. So now I'm going to take my pants and I want to match up the side seams of my waistband. This is going on upside down, right? So right sides together. I want to make sure that the part that I have facing out is my facing, and because I have this stay stitching, I want to make sure that that's on the facing side, because I'm going to pin these and lift it up like this. So I'm going to match the side seams. On this side, and then match the side seams. On this side. And then I just have to pin around. And if you're worried about getting it even, you can find, you know, the quarter mark on your waistband and put that in the center front. These go on pretty well. The pattern is drafted nicely. I didn't have much trouble fitting them on there. Look at that, that's perfect. But again, I would use, you know, a decent amount of pins because this knits tend to be slippery. And you can see now why we sewed these edges together, because it makes, can you imagine if you're trying to like pin 3 layers of fabric here? It's hard enough with 2 because they are a little slippery. So then the waistband now is just one unit instead of 2 pieces with a piece of elastic, regardless of how you did the elastic. And ta-da, perfect fit. So we have this waistband pinned all the way around the waist, and it's right sides together. This is the right side of the waistband, so it's going to turn up like this after we sew it. And then all we need to do is hem our pants and we're done. That's pretty exciting. Now, I would use a twin needle to hem these. Certainly you're going to try them on, and you can finish the edge or not with a knit. You really don't have to, because it's not going to unravel, and then you're just going to turn them up. You don't want a big hem with a twin needle. Like, you don't want your twin needle stitch way up here. You want it fairly down fairly close. And these are lightweight. You don't need a big hem on them. So measure them and then give yourself, you know, 3/4 of an inch, and then do a twin needle stitch. And I will link, through the link, you'll find the video on how to use a twin needle. And our pants are done. The jacket's done, the top is done, and we have a nice outfit. We're ready to go. Coming up next, I am going to make this skirt, this cute little simplicity skirt. This is a new pattern with the gathering in the front, and this top isn't gonna work for me. And I think I'm going to make this top, although a one shoulder deal is not going to work for me, so I'm going to make it ruched, which I really like, but I'm going to put a solid shoulder on this side. So I'll just transfer the shoulder to this side without the ruching. So I'll show you how to do that. And I think that will make this top, and this skirt will make a cute little outfit. And I have it in a really nice mint green, so keep an eye out for that. Till next time, happy sewing.